today's presentation on the World Wide Web in the course on Educational Communication Technologies. I am Professor P.V. Suresh from School of Computers and Information Sciences of Indira Gandhi National Open University. The objective of today's presentation is to discuss about various functions and other associated features of World Wide Web. First of all, let us see what is meant by World Wide Web. Often it is confused with the word Internet. Often we face the question, what are the differences between Internet and World Wide Web? Many people also say that both are synonyms. But today's presentation, we will focus only on World Wide Web. We cannot say that it is synonym for Internet. The World Wide Web is commonly known as the web. It is an information system where documents and other web resources are identified by uniform resource locators such as http www.igno.ac.in, which may be interlinked by hyperlinks and are accessible over the internet. The resources of the web are transferred via the hypertext transfer protocol, may be accessed by users by a software application called a web browser and are published by a software application called a web server. Now there are three phrases which we used. One is hypertext transfer protocol, the other is web browser, the other is web server. Now protocol means they are set of rules that are used to communicate between various nodes on the network, and there are different types of protocols among them. For the case of internet, we use hypertext transfer protocol. All of you know what is meant by a web browser. That is the software with the help of which you will be accessing the web pages, websites, portals, whatever it is, whatever is available on the net. Normally you will be using a web browser. There are many web browsers in the market: Microsoft Internet Explorer, Microsoft Edge, Mosaic, we have Google Chrome, Firefox, many. So whatever is convenient for you or you are feeling comfortable, you can use it. Then the other phrase which we counted today is web server. Basically web server is the machine where all these web pages are located. On the internet there are many web servers. So when you type the address like http www.igno.ac.in, that particular communication goes to a particular web server with a request that you need the pages related to that particular domain. The domain is igno.ac.in. So these pages are sent over the network to that browser which made the request. So the request is sent to the server responds, the browser receives, and it loads on the page, and you will be able to watch them. That is how web server and web browser work, and the protocol on which they communicate are HTTP. There are different variants of this particular protocol. In the case of security or a secure HTTP, we use HTTPS. So there are many variants of protocols as well as the servers as well as the browsers. The World Wide Web is not synonymous with the internet, which predated the web in some form by over 2 decades and upon the technologies of which the web is built. English scientist Tim Berners-Lee invented the World Wide Web in 1989. He wrote the first web browser in 1990 while employed at CERN near Geneva, Switzerland. The browser was released outside CERN to other research institutions starting in January 1991 and then to the general public in August 1991. The web began to enter everyday use in 1993 onwards, when websites were generally started to become available. The World Wide Web has been central to the development of the information age and is the primary tool billions of people use to interact on the net. Web resources may be of any type. They may be of downloaded media, but web pages are hypertext documents formatted in hypertext markup language. Special HTML syntax displays embedded hyperlinks with URLs which permit users to navigate to other web resources. In addition to text, web pages may contain references to images, video, audio, and software components which are either displayed or internally executed in the user's web browser to render pages or streams of multimedia content. Multiple web resources with a common theme and usually a common domain name make up a website. Websites are stored in computers that are running on a web server, which is a program that responds to requests made over the internet from web browsers running on a user's computer. Website content can be provided by a publisher or interactively from user-generated content. Websites are provided for a myriad of informative, entertainment, commercial and governmental reasons. Now briefly let us look at the history of the World Wide Web. The underlying concept of hypertext originated in various projects previously from the 1960s, such as the hypertext editing system at Brown University, Ted Nelson's project Xanadu, and Douglas Engelbart's online system. Both Nelson and Engelbart were in turn inspired by Vannevar Bush microfilm-based Memex, which was described in the 1945 essay As We May Think. Tim Berners-Lee's vision of a global hyperlinked information system became a possibility by the second half of the 1980s. By 1985, the global internet began to proliferate in Europe and the domain system came into being. In 1988, the first direct IP connection between Europe and North America was made, and Berners-Lee began to openly discuss the possibility of a web-like system at CERN. While working at CERN, Berners-Lee became frustrated with the inefficiencies and difficulties posed by finding information stored on different computers. On 12 March 1989, he submitted a memorandum titled Information Management, a proposal to the management at CERN for a system called MESH that referenced Inquire, a database and software project he has built in 1980, which used the term web and described a more elaborate information management system based on links embedded as text. Imagine then the references in this document all being associated with the network address of the thing to which they referred, so that while reading this document, you could skip to them with a click of the mouse. Such a system was explained by him as one of the existing meanings of the word hypertext, a term that he says was coined in the 1950s. There is no reason, the proposal continues, why such hypertext links could not encompass multimedia documents including graphics, speech and video, so that Berners-Lee goes on to use the term hypermedia. With help from his colleague and fellow hypertext enthusiast Robert Calillo, he published a more formal proposal on 12 November 1990 to build a hypertext project called World Wide Web. That is one word where you can call it as WWW. As a web of hypertext documents to be viewed by browsers using a client-server architecture. At this point, HTML and HTTP had already been in the development for about 2 months, and the first web server was about a month from completing its first successful test. This proposal estimated that a read-only web would be developed within 3 months and that it would take 6 months to achieve the creation of new links and new material by readers, so that authorship becomes universal, as well as the automatic notification of a reader when new material of interest to him or her has become available. While the read-only goal was met, accessible authorship of web content took longer to mature, with the wiki concept, WebDAV, blogs, Web 2.0 and RSS or Atom. The proposal was modeled after the SGML reader Dynatext by Electronic Book Technology, a spin-off from the Institute for Research in Information and Scholarship at Brown University. The Dynatext system, licensed by CERN, was a key player in the extension of the SGML ISO 8879:1986 to hypermedia within high time. But it was considered too expensive and had an inappropriate licensing policy for use in the general high energy physics community, namely a fee for each document and each document alteration. A Next computer was used by Berners-Lee as the world's first web server and also to write the first web browser in 1990. By Christmas 1990, Berners-Lee had built all the tools necessary for a working web the first web browser, that is World Wide Web, which was a web editor as well, and the first web server. The first website which described the project itself was published on 20th December 1990. The first web page may be lost, but Paul Jones of UNC Chapel Hill in North Carolina announced in May 2013 that Berners-Lee gave him what he says is the oldest known web page during a visit to UNC in 1991. Jones stored it on a magneto-optical drive and on his next computer. On 6 August 1991, Berners-Lee published a short summary of the World Wide Web project on the news group alt.hypertext. This date is sometimes confused with the public availability of the first web servers, which had occurred months earlier. As another example of such confusion, several news media reported that the first photo on the web was published by Berners-Lee in 1992. An image of the CERN house band Les Horribles Sonates taken by Silvano di Gennaro. Gennaro has disclaimed the story, writing that media were totally distorting our words for the sake of cheap sensationalism. The first server outside Europe was installed in December 1991 at the Stanford Linear Accelerator Center in Palo Alto, California, to host the Spirus HEB database. Berners-Lee's breakthrough was to marry hypertext to the internet. In his book Weaving the Web, he explains that he had repeatedly suggested to members of both technical communities that a marriage between the two technologies was possible. But when no one took up this invitation, he finally assumed the project himself. In the process, he developed three essential technologies: a system of globally unique identifiers for resources on the web and elsewhere, the Universal Document Identifier, later known as Uniform Resource Locator, and Uniform Resource Identifier, the publishing language Hypertext Markup Language, and the Hypertext Transfer Protocol. The World Wide Web had several differences from other hypertext systems available at the time. The web required only unidirectional links rather than bidirectional ones, making it possible for someone to link to another resource without action by the owner of that resource. It also significantly reduced the difficulty of implementing web servers and browsers in comparison to earlier systems, but in turn presented the chronic problem of link rot. Unlike predecessors such as HyperCard, the World Wide Web was non-proprietary, making it possible to develop servers and clients independently and to add extensions without licensing restrictions. On 30th April 1993, CERN announced that the World Wide Web would be free to anyone with no fees due. Coming 2 months after the announcement that the server implementation of the Gopher protocol was no longer free to use, this produced a rapid shift away from Gopher and towards the web. An early popular web browser was Voila www for Unix and the X Windows system. The web began to enter general use in 1993, and after that, when websites were everyday use started to become available. Historians generally agree that a turning point for the web began in the 1993 introduction of Mosaic, a graphical web browser developed at the National Center for Supercomputing Applications at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. The development was led by Mark Andreessen, while funding came from the US High Performance Computing and Communications Initiative and the High Performance Computing Act of 1991, one of several computing developments initiated by the US Senator Al Gore. Prior to the release of Mosaic, graphics were not commonly mixed with text in web pages, and the web was less popular than older protocols such as Gopher and wide area information servers. Mosaic's graphical user interface allowed the web to become by far the most popular protocol on the internet. The World Wide Web Consortium was founded by Tim Berners-Lee after he left the European Organization for Nuclear Research in October 1994. It was founded at the MIT Laboratory of Computer Science with support from the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, which had pioneered the internet. A year later, a second site was founded at INRIA with support from the European Commission DG INFSO, and in 1996 a third continental site was created in Japan at Keio University. By the end of 1994, The total number of websites was still relatively small, but many notable websites were already active that foreshadowed or inspired today's most popular services. Connected by the internet, other websites were created around the world. This motivated international standards development for protocols and formatting. Berners-Lee continued to stay involved in guiding the development of web standards such as the markup languages to compose web pages, and he advocated his vision of a semantic web. The World Wide Web enabled the spread of information over the internet through an easy to use and flexible format. It thus played an important role in popularizing the use of the internet. Although the two terms are sometimes conflated in popular use, World Wide Web is not synonymous with internet. The web is an information space containing hyperlinked documents and other resources identified by their URIs. It is implemented as both client and server software using internet protocols such as TCP/IP and HTTP. Berners-Lee was knighted in 2004 by Queen Elizabeth II for services to the global development of the internet. He never patented his invention. And now let us see to the functions of the World Wide Web. The terms internet and the World Wide Web are often used without much distinction. However, the two terms do not mean the same thing. The internet is a global system of interconnected computer networks. In contrast, the World Wide Web is a global connection of documents and other resources linked by hyperlinks and URIs. Web resources are accessed using HTTP or HTTPS, which are application level internet protocols that use the internet's transport protocols. Viewing a web page on the World Wide Web normally begins either by typing the URL of the page into the web browser or by following a hyperlink to that page or resource. The web browser then initiates a series of background communication messages to fetch and display the requested page. In the 1960s, using a browser to view the web pages and to move from one web page to another through hyperlinks came to be known as browsing, web serving, that is after channel surfing, or navigating the web. Early studies of this new behavior investigated user patterns in using the web browsers. One study, for example, found 5 user patterns: exploratory surfing, window surfing, evolved surfing, bounded navigation, and targeted navigation. The following example demonstrates the functioning of a web browser when accessing a web page at the URL http www.igno.ac.in. The browser resolves the server name of the URL into an Internet Protocol address using the globally distributed domain name system. This lookup returns an IP address such as 203.0.113.4 or 2001:db8:2e:7334. The browser then requests the resource by sending an HTTP request across the internet by the computer at that address. It requests service from a specific TCP port number that is well known for the HTTP service, so that the receiving host can distinguish a HTTP request from other network protocols it may be servicing. HTTP normally uses port number 80 and the HTTP normally uses port number 443. And normally HTTPS uses port number 443. The content of the HTTP request can be as simple as 2 lines of text. The web browser parses the HTML and interprets the markup and that surrounds the words to format the text on the screen. Many web pages use HTML to reference the URL of other resources such as images, other embedded media, scripts that affect page behavior, and cascading style sheets that affect page layout. The browser makes additional HTTP requests to the web server for those other internet media types. As it receives their content from the web server, the browser progressively reorders the page onto the screen as specified by its HTML and these additional resources. HTML elements are the building blocks of HTML pages. With HTML constructs, images and other objects such as interactive forms may be embedded into the rendered page. HTML provides a means to create structured documents by denoting structural semantics for text such as headings, paragraphs, lists, links, quotes, and other items. HTML elements are delineated by tags written using angular brackets. Tags such as image tag and input tag directly introduce content into the page. Other tags such as paragraph tag surround and provide information about the document text and may include other tags such as sub-elements. Browsers do not display the HTML tags but use them to interpret the content of the page. HTML can embed programs written in a scripting language such as a JavaScript, which affects the behavior and content of the web pages. Inclusion of CSS defines the look and layout of content. The World Wide Web Consortium, maintainer of both the HTML and the CSS standards, has encouraged the use of CSS over explicit presentational HTML since 1997. Now let us see how different web pages are linked. Most web pages contain hyperlinks to other related pages and perhaps to downloadable files, source documents, definitions, and other web resources. In the underlying HTML, a hyperlink looks like anchor tag, href, then you give the URL and provide a label to it. So the label is visible. When you click on the label, the concerned web page is loaded. Such a collection of useful related resources interconnected via hypertext links is dubbed a web of information. Publication on the internet created what Tim Berners-Lee first called the World Wide Web in its original camel case, which was subsequently discarded in 1990. The hyperlink structure of the web is described by the web graph. The nodes of the web graph correspond to the web pages or URLs, the directed edges between them to the hyperlinks. Over time, many web resources pointed to by hyperlinks disappear, relocate, or are replaced with different content. This makes hyperlinks obsolete, a phenomenon referred to in some circles as a link rot, and the hyperlinks affected by it are often called dead links. The ephemeral nature of the web has prompted many efforts to archive websites. The Internet Archive, active since 1996, is the best known of such efforts. Now let us see the World Wide Web prefix. Many host names used for the World Wide Web begin with www because of the long-standing practice of naming internet hosts according to the services they provide. The host name of a web server is often www in the same way that it may be FTP for an FTP server and news or NNTP for a Usenet news server. These host names appear as a domain name system or subdomain names as in www.igno.ac.in. The use of www is not required by any technical or policy standard, and many websites do not use it. According to Paolo Palagi, who worked at CERN along with Tim Berners-Lee, the popular use of World Wide Web as subdomain was accidental. The World Wide Web project page has intended to be published as www.cern.ch, while info.cern.ch was intended to be the CERN homepage. However, the DNS records were never switched, and the practice of prepending www to an institution's website domain was subsequently copied. Many established websites still use the prefix or they employ other subdomain names such as www2, secure, or en for specific purposes. Many such web servers are set up so that both the main domain name and the www subdomain refer to the same site. Others require one form or the other, or they may map to different websites. The use of a subdomain name is useful for load balancing incoming web traffic by creating a CNAME record that points to a cluster of web servers. Since currently only a subdomain name can be used in a CNAME, the same result cannot be achieved by using the bare domain root. When a user submits an incomplete domain name to a web browser in its address bar input field, some web browsers automatically try adding the prefix to the beginning of it and possibly .com, .org and .net at the end, depending on what might be missing. For example, entering Microsoft may be transformed to http://www.microsoft.com and an OpenOffice to http://www.openoffice.org. This feature started appearing in early versions of Firefox when it still had the working title Firebird in early 2003 from an earlier practice in browsers such as Lynx. It is reported that Microsoft was granted a US patent for the same idea in 2008, but only for mobile devices. In English, www is usually read as www. Some users pronounce it as dub, particularly in New Zealand. Stephen Fry, in his Podgrams series of podcasts, pronounces it oo. The English writer Douglas Adams once quipped the Independent paper on Sunday. The World Wide Web is the only thing I know of whose shortened form takes 3 times longer to say than what it is short for. In Mandarin Chinese, World Wide Web is commonly translated into a phono-semantic matching to Wan Wai Wang, which satisfies www and literally means myriad dimensional net, a translation that reflects the design concept and proliferation of the World Wide Web. Tim Berners-Lee's web space states that World Wide Web is officially spelled as 3 separate words, each capitalized with no intervening hyphens. Use of the World Wide Web prefix has been declining, especially when Web 2.0 web applications sought to brand their domain names and make them easily pronounceable. As the mobile web grew in popularity, services like gmail.com, outlook.com, myspace.com, facebook.com and twitter.com are often mostly mentioned without adding www to the domain. Now let us have a look at the scheme specifiers. The scheme specifiers http:// and https:// at the start of a web URI refer to Hypertext Transfer Protocol or HTTP Secure respectively. They specify the communication protocol to use for the request and response. The HTTP protocol is fundamental to the operation of the World Wide Web, and the added encryption layer in HTTPS is essential when browsers send or retrieve confidential data such as passwords or banking information. Web browsers usually automatically prepend http:// to user entered URIs if omitted. Now let us see what the pages mean. A web page is a document that is suitable for the World Wide Web and web browsers. A web browser displays a web page on a monitor or a mobile device. So it's all what I want to share with you about the World Wide Web in today's presentation. So one thing that is most important is that World Wide Web and Internet are both different. Don't use them as synonyms. They are having huge differences. That is what we have to know about the World Wide Web, and there are many more things which we will be sharing in the future presentations. So now let us sum up the today's presentation. Today we introduced the World Wide Web to you. Then it was clearly mentioned that there are differences between World Wide Web and the Internet. Normally people take them as synonyms but never use World Wide Web and Internet as synonyms. We have also seen the features of the World Wide Web. The most noteworthy is that whenever you type the website address, www comes into the picture. However, when you are explicitly mentioning the www, it is not essential that www is mentioned. It's happening since long time and it's continuing now also, but still you will come across many websites where www was not mentioned. We have seen the scheme specifiers, we have seen different URL examples, we have seen the HTTP, we have seen the HTTPS, so protocols, web browsers, web servers, so many things we discussed in today's lecture, but the most important thing is that there is a difference between World Wide Web and the Internet, and never think that both are same. So I thank you very much for joining the presentation today. Thanks a lot.